we go. Looks like we're able to rock and roll now.
Wonderful. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for, taking the time out of your day to attend this cyber banter with Fletus and I. And sorry for the technical delays. The first time either one of us has done something like this. So I appreciate you guys holding in there for us. Thank you to Fletus for allowing me to be the guest speaker today. It's exciting. My name is Christopher Otten. I'm an application support analyst at a financial institution in North Carolina, with my focus being on information security architecture. I recently graduated from Appalachian State University in North Carolina with a degree in cybersecurity and a degree in computer information systems, which is actually how I met Fletus, who's been acting as my mentor ever since. Today, I'll be presenting on the topic of quantum computing and how it poses the next big threat to encryption. Before we go ahead and jump into anything, I want to go over an agenda for this evening. First, we'll go over a bit about cryptography, how it works and why it's essential to keeping our data safe. Second, we're going to go over what quantum computing is, go through all the buzzwords like qubits and entanglement and how quantum computers actually pose a threat to modern cryptography. Next, we'll take a look at post-quantum cryptography, or PQC, and the importance of the research backing it. We'll also learn how Star Wars plays into all of this. After that, we'll talk about store now, decrypt later, what that means for data today, and what it could mean in 10 to 15 years' time. Then finally, a call to action, where we will review some ways to slow down or maybe even prevent the theft and decryption of data. So, to understand the threat that quantum computing poses, we must first look at how modern cryptography actually works. Every time you send a message, make a payment on Venmo online, or log into an account even, cryptography is silently working in the background to protect your data. It ensures two things, right? Confidentiality, so only the authorized parties of that data can read the information. And two, integrity, meaning the data isn't tampered with. You know it's legit. At its core, cryptography is built on hard mathematical problems, like factoring large numbers or solving discrete logarithms. These problems are so complex that classical computers would take thousands of years to crack them. Even supercomputers would take thousands of years. This is why systems like RSA and ECC, which is elliptic curve cryptography, have been trusted with our data for decades. We haven't needed anything more. Take public-private key exchange, for example. Imagine a locked mailbox in the front of your yard. Everybody can walk up to the mailbox and drop a letter in, which is your public key, but only you have the physical key to open the mailbox, which is your private key. That's what you would use to read the letters. Without the private key, nobody that walks up to the mailbox can open it and look inside. This kind of asymmetry is foundational to secure communication online. So let's dive a bit deeper into how these math problems work. I promise I won't go into a crazy math lecture. I'm not a huge math guy, but just bear with me. So these problems fall into three categories known as computational complexity classes. The first being polynomial time problems. These problems are easy for computers to solve and very easy to verify. Take a sorting list, for an example. If I gave you a list of 50 numbers, you could easily look at each number and place it in its correct spot in its list. That's an easy problem for you to solve and easy to verify. For computers, it's a breeze. Next up is non-deterministic polynomial time problems. These problems are more difficult to solve, but still pretty easy to verify. A good way to think about this is to think about your phone's GPS mapping system. It's difficult for a computer to take every single road into account when trying to give you a list of 5 different routes you could take to get to your destination. But once it finds those 5 routes, you can easily look through and choose the right one, right? Which is fastest, which doesn't take tolls. That's a non-deterministic polynomial time problem. It was difficult for the computer to solve. It had to take thousands of roads into account in the traffic and collisions, road closures, everything like that. It was computationally pretty difficult to solve. But once you had the 5 routes that it gave you, it was easy to verify which one you wanted to take because you would just choose the shortest one. Next up is NP-hard problems. These are non-deterministic polynomial time problems that are way above the scale of NP-regular. These problems are extremely difficult to solve and still relatively easy to verify. I'll say relatively. Here's a way to think about it. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Sudoku. or even played it before. Now, this is a bit of a Sudoku board on steroids, right? Instead of 3 by 3, it's a 4 by 4. And in each sub-square, you have 1 through 9, like regular, and you also have A through G. So this is a 16 by 16 board. If I gave you this and said, go ahead and solve it, it'd probably take an average Sudoku player a couple hours to think of everything, because a number in the bottom right corner might mess up a one in the far left corner 15 squares away from it. So this is like an NP hard problem. It's hard to solve, but if I gave you this, which is the solved board, it's relatively easy to go square by square and line by line to figure out, all right, does the top line have 1 through 9? Check. Does it have A through G? Check. And you can go down line by line and check. This is what I mean by hard to solve but easy to verify. The computer could not do this in an instant, but it could check if this was the right solution in an instant. But here's the catch. All of these non-deterministic polynomial time problems that our cryptography is based on relies on classical computers being slow and staying slow at solving these math problems. If something could drastically speed this up, the entire system would crumble. Enter quantum computing, where ones and zeros have gone out of fashion. Unlike classical computers that use bits, which can either be on or off because they're just electrical signals, zeros or ones respectively, quantum computers use something called qubits. A qubit isn't just 1 or 0, it's 1 and 0 simultaneously, thanks to a phenomenon called superposition. Imagine a spinning coin on your desk. You spin the coin. When it's spinning, it's neither heads or tails until it lands. It's kind of both. Qubits work similarly, existing in multiple states at once until you observe them. It's like smacking your hand down on that coin as it's spinning. Under your hand, it's either a heads or a tails. Once you observe a qubit, it's neither 0 or 1, it's that exact one that you observed. Now, pair that with something called entanglement, which is where qubits become linked. If you change one, the other one might instantly reflect that change, and you can't tell which ones are linked. It'll reflect that change even across vast distances. So Einstein, way back in the day, was actually working on quantum mechanics, and when he figured out this phenomenon, he famously called it spooky action at a distance. It scared him because the connection between these two qubits theoretically happens faster than light. It happens instantaneously, which in mathematics has really not been seen before. This combination allows quantum computers to solve very, very niche problems exponentially faster. Tasks like simulating molecules or optimizing complex systems for logistics, which would take classical machines millennia, could be done in a few hours or days with quantum computers. But, and this is critical, today's quantum computers aren't really plausible yet, right? They're still very fragile, very error-prone, and not yet scalable. Most have fewer than 1,000 qubits, which is changing now, but that's far from what's needed for practical cryptography attacks. Most experts say 100,000 to 1 million qubits is needed for kind of day zero attacks. Now, 1,000 qubits that we have today is nothing to scoff at. The equation on the right, 2 to the q power, represents how many states a quantum computer can represent at one time, with q being the number of qubits. Because the power scales exponentially to the q power, a quantum computer that has just 266 qubits can represent more states at one time than there are atoms in our observable universe. With these kind of numbers, it becomes a little bit clearer why Einstein decided to throw in the towel and stop studying quantum mechanics and went hands off. So, why does this all matter to encryption? Because algorithms like Shor's algorithm, which is used for factoring primes, and Grover's, which is for brute force search, they exploit these quantum properties for gain. They turn problems that are impossible for classical machines into trivial ones for quantum ones. These were theorized way back in the day to work on a perfectly efficient quantum computer, which we are far from, but we are rapidly approaching a day where that could be a possibility. One of the more visual differences between traditional computers and quantum computers, however, is that traditional computers could look like little black boxes in the corner, or maybe even a fancy silver slab with a fruit logo on the front. But quantum computers can look like giant space lasers. Okay, so quantum computers could break today's encryption, but here's the good news, right? We're not entirely defenseless. Enter post-quantum cryptography, which are algorithms designed to withstand quantum attacks. So the race is on to standardize these methods of perfectly quantum-resistant cryptographic methods. Organizations like NIST, which is the North American Institute for Science and Technology, has been evaluating submissions for years. Think of it like a global bake-off for the toughest math problems almost. It's problems that even quantum computers theoretically would struggle to solve. The front runners are lattice-based cryptography methods. Imagine trying to find the shortest path in a maze with infinite dimensions. It's that kind of complexity that lattices introduce. There's thousands of dimensions that these lattice problems can introduce to a computer to completely confuse it. Other candidates include hash-based and code-based schemes, but lattices have become the front runner because they're more versatile, energy, and cost efficient. Remember, quantum computers take a lot of energy to run, more so than is practical right now. But post-quantum cryptography, or PQC, isn't necessarily a plug-and-play solution. First, these algorithms are slower and way bulkier than current ones. Upgrading the infrastructure, especially critical infrastructure, like IoT devices and legacy systems, will be a marathon, not a sprint. Second, we need global coordination to make this happen. A single weak link, a single bank, a government, a hospital could jeopardize entire networks, leaving everybody at risk. And here's the urgency. Even if quantum computers are a decade away, we have to act now. Migrating to post-quantum cryptography could take just as long, a decade, 15 years even. Think about how many organizations would need to transfer over. It's like rebuilding the foundation of a skyscraper while people are still living inside it. It's a near impossible task, but it could be done. So wait, where does Star Wars come into this? I was promised Star Wars at the beginning of the presentation. Well, the front runners for NIST's certification process and standardization had the production name of Crystals Kyber, which if you flip the words around gives you Kyber crystals. And that's what powers lightsabers in Star Wars. So the majority of the team behind this encryption method are huge Star Wars fans. And they decided to name each mechanic in it after a different aspect of the Star Wars universe. So I just thought that was a little something fun to add in. So store now, decrypt later. What is it? Where's the threat? So imagine a thief stealing a locked safe out of the bank, knowing that they can't crack it now, but they'll be able to crack it in 10 years. That's what store now and decrypt later is in a nutshell. So adversaries like nation states and individual hackers are already harvesting personal encrypted data today. Financial records, medical histories, state secrets, anything valuable that they think will be valuable in 5 to 10 years, they're stealing and taking in hopes that one day quantum computers could crack it for them and they're in possession of these state secrets now. They don't need quantum computers just yet, they just need to wait. Why? Because, well, once quantum computers arrive and they become normalized, that encrypted data becomes a gold mine. Yeah, maybe your Clash of Clans account isn't really helpful in 10 years, but think about a nation's banking information or critical infrastructure, nuclear power plants, regular power plants, healthcare. All of these things will still be valuable in 10 years' time to adversaries. And these aren't hypotheticals. So there was a 2023 breach of X Corp's encrypted backups where the hackers knew that they had no use for the information right now, but they stole it anyway. They were able to take it. It was a bet. They were betting on future decryption. Once quantum computers become available, that data is encrypted with current methods like RSA and ECC, meaning once quantum computers are standardized, those hackers can decrypt that data and it all becomes a gold mine to them. They can sell it, use it for profit, anything. But the real damage isn't just leaked data, it's trust. So if citizens, customers, or allies believe their communications could be retroactively exposed, they're going to hesitate to share anything sensitive even today. Democracy, diplomacy, and innovation rely on these confidentiality over time. All it takes is one breach, and users and members will kind of pull out of your service, organization, or even government. So, what can we do? Do we delete all of our data and live off grid? No, that's impractical, but the answer lies in future proofing the past. So, let's explore how we can do that. Here's my call to action. First, speed matters with this kind of thing. Every day we delay PQC, which is post-quantum cryptography migration, is a day that attackers can stockpile data, stockpiling it for later to hack and then use it against us. Companies like Google and Cloudflare are already testing hybrid systems using NIST standardized encryption methods. They mix classical computing encryption with post-quantum encryption as a safety net in hopes that that'll be enough. For ultra-sensitive data, QKD, which is quantum key distribution, can be used, and that offers a physics-backed solution. It's like sending a secret message that self-destructs if it's intercepted, thanks to some of these quantum principles that Einstein was studying. China's MISIUS satellite and the European Union's Quantum Internet Alliance are pioneering this, but it's extremely costly and niche for now. Hopefully, that will become more cost efficient in the future, meaning we can send quantum-backed messages that if an attacker does somehow encrypt it, the message kind of implodes on itself and it's not useful even if they're able to decrypt it. Next, I think we really need to rethink what we're keeping, right? It's nice to data hoard, but do hospitals really need 60-year-old patient records? Probably not. I think we need to automate data expiration like a digital shredder. I don't know what that timeline is, and experts are still debating it, but I think that's a critical key to make sure we're not exposing ourselves 20 years in the future for something that will still be useful to adversaries. This helps minimize that store now, decrypt later loot pile that we were talking about in the previous slide. So I think the research is heading in the right direction, and it's extremely important that organizations, governments listen and follow these implementation procedures, and they keep an eye on things, as our data is arguably one of the most important things we need to keep safe. That's the end of my slideshow. Thank you guys for listening. I'd love to take questions if anybody wants to drop questions in the chat. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Make sure you can see me here. Let's change our view. And I threw up our first question for us. So feel free to take a look at that. And I'll let you take first stab at it.
Wonderful. The buzzword is now AI. How will quantum computing impact AI? Well, arguably right now, from what the research is coming out, that AI doesn't really have a niche in quantum computing. So I mentioned that quantum computers are extremely powerful in very certain situations, right? And those situations are kind of what powers our cryptography today. So it's really good at cracking math problems, and quantum computers are going to be really good in the logistics industry. But right now, like language models, large language models don't really have a place with quantum computers just because of how the physics of quantum computers react. So I think traditional computers are still going to be extremely, extremely common because you can't do things like word processing, image manipulation, any of that on a quantum computer. Remember, I think of quantum computers more as like math tools, almost like a calculator. We can't really think of quantum computers yet as a standard computer that can do this, and it's a Swiss Army knife. So right now, quantum computers aren't really going to impact AI. But the future changes exponentially within the day. So that could change in a year's time, that could change in 10 years' time. But I think it's a really interesting space. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, Chris, enjoyed the presentation again. Appreciate the extra insight that you took into this. So if I was interested in learning more about post-quantum computing, where would you recommend I start my research?
I would start just delving into the depths with the NIST standardization. NIST is a documentarian at heart. They keep so many documents, and they've documented their processes for these quantum cryptographic standardization protocols. They keep all of the math behind it, and they publish documents with kind of layman's terms, and that's how I was able to learn about these. And I talked to a few NIST representatives. That's a great thing. There's a lot of information now that's coming out, mainly recently in the last couple of weeks, with like tech YouTubers and influencers. They're starting to kind of pick up on the hype train a bit and aggregate that information. Of course, you need to kind of go back to the source of that information. Don't take it as fact, because we all know that we've heard quantum computers in the news so much, right? Will quantum computers help me game better? Will quantum computers do AI? Right now, most of the answer to that is no. But I think a great place to start is the NIST quantum cryptographic website. And I can post that. I can put that down in the chat. I'll get that link, and I would think that's a great place to start.
Excellent. We got another question here for you.
Yeah. What practical steps can small businesses take today to prepare for quantum resistant encryption and protect against future threats from quantum computers? I think small businesses is a really interesting kind of place, because they don't have a ton of money to invest in these, quantum cryptographic methods, which are heavy, bulky, costly. I think the last slide with the data retention policies is a really great place to start. Good place to start. Small businesses need to, and it's easier now for small businesses to do this, but they need to keep the data of their customers safe using today's methods, right? And I think with the standardization of PQC at the government level and at the huge organization level, it's going to start to trickle down to small businesses, especially like e-commerce that deals with PCI data, right? Payment card industry data, the big things that could still be useful in 5, 10, 15 years time.
Yeah, I would agree. And from a S&B point of view, I think it's similar to what you talked about. You just make sure that when you are setting up your cryptography for your agents, for your technologies, that you've taken the time to realize how long you want something to be a secret. It's really, that's all encryption's for. Nothing is ever confidential forever. It just needs to be until it's declassified. So same with quantum. If your data rolls every 12 hours, then your encryption needs to last 12 hours and 1 minute. If your data, it needs to last a year, it just needs to be 166 days. So it's all about the time to live and how encryption comes in, even for a small business.
Wonderful. There's
So
one more
here's our next question.
What are possible threats in QC? I realized I assumed that QC in your last question meant quantum computing, but I guess it could also mean quantum cryptography. So I'll kind of touch on both. The possible threats with quantum computing right now is adversaries. Our adversaries are obviously not really posting their progress in quantum computing. So we kind of know, I'm coming at this as a US citizen. We know where the US is with Microsoft, Google. Microsoft just released a new, or kind of unveiled their new quantum chip, which is a huge break forward. We know where US companies are and Chinese companies, but we're not really sure where our adversaries' governments are. I think a huge part of that is we don't know what we don't know, and that's I think the biggest threat with quantum computers right now. We don't know who has the biggest quantum computer officially. We don't know when they're going to become viable, right? The growth, the research is scaling exponentially. So 5 years ago, quantum computers were not really ever a big talking point, and now they have been. And even 2 years ago, they were saying, ooh, quantum computers could break cryptography in the next 50 years. That year mark has bumped down each year to now experts are saying 5 to 10. Some are saying it could be 2 years from now. So I think that's the biggest threat is it's scaling exponentially, and the research backing quantum cryptography needs to also scale exponentially, and it needs to be standardized and implemented as soon as possible. So possible threats with quantum cryptography. Now, I know I touched on the NIST standardization, and I mentioned Crystal's Kyber, but there was a couple other ones. Before Crystal's Kyber was a front runner, there was one, I forget its name. It didn't make it that far, but this was hailed in the early days of the standardization process as the one and only. Like this was light. This was a light, fast, agile, and cheap method to quantumly encrypt data. Right. All of the scientists were working on it for 2 years, and NIST was like, "This is perfect." So they opened it up. They opened it up to their closed research team. One of those researchers was a 15-year-old with a 10-year-old Dell Inspiron gaming laptop. And in 24 hours after the release, this 15-year-old had found a crack in that encryption method. And keep in mind, this encryption method is meant to protect against quantum computer attacks. And he just used a 12 or 10-year-old Dell gaming laptop, a normal traditional computer, an old one at that, to crack this supposedly quantum resistant cryptography. So I think there it's with quantum cryptography, it's also what we don't know. That, yeah, a quantum encryption method right now is great, but all it takes is one more researcher to crack it and find a flaw in the system that could expose that data. So I think quantum cryptography is kind of facing the risk of, we need to implement it as soon as possible to protect against attacks, but also, is what we're implementing safe enough to implement, right? Because, Google, I mentioned Google and Cloudflare, they've already implemented Crystal's Kyber and Crystal's Dilithium, which is another one, into their encryption suite. And those have gone through extensive testing, including that 15-year-old with the laptop. But it's what we don't know. It's really what we don't know. RSA and ECC, modern encryption methods, have been tried, tested, abused, brute forced. We kind of know where they stand, right? If you have this long of a password with this many characters, we can tell you a pretty good estimation on how long it would take to brute force crack that, right? But with quantum cryptography, there's really no way of knowing, because it's not standardized. It really hasn't been used, and it's not in the industry enough to know. So that's kind of the threats right now.
So I'll add a little bit more just in general that applies with any compute. So we've all learned Moore's law. Think about that as pretty much every 12 to 18 months, we're doubling. The same goes to our cryptography. You probably watched a show, NCIS or others, all it's proprietary. That just means it's snake oil. All of our encryption mechanisms that we use today have aged. Most of them are 40 to 50 years old. So it's not like you deployed it today. You want time for crypto analysis and analysts to try to break the math, because it's really just a math problem. Chris talked about that in his presentation. We don't go into the math. We trust our computers to do the ones and zeros. So anytime you hear this is proprietary, run. A vendor should never use proprietary cryptography. So when it comes to quantum computing, same thing. When quantum cryptography hits, they need to age out. They need to sit on the shelf, give mathematicians, crypto analysts time. Because, funny story, when DVDs came out, they didn't want them pirated. So they put proprietary on them. 2 teenagers, a box of Yoo-Hoos, and some Hot Pockets is all it took them to break the encryption on a DVD. And that was over a weekend. And that was just a Sony or someone else trying to protect their intellectual property by not understanding the mathematics behind what they were trying to protect.
Yeah, I agree with Fletus. It's you want it to be broken, right? In a sense, you want it to be tried, tested, and abused, like the current cryptographic methods that we use, and that's how we know they work. But with PQC, it's it's kind of the race against time. You need it encrypted, you need it implemented, but also it would be great to have 10, 15 years to abuse it, see what its flaws are, find the best one, and then implement it. But we do not have 10 to 15 years. We need it relatively soon. And so I think more researchers and more funding should be going into these methods, because it really will affect, if researchers call it PQ0 or no, Y2Q as a play on Y2K. And Y2Q is the day that quantum computers are finally able to break modern cryptography. When that happens, we need methods to stop it, or else everything kind of goes in the hole. So it's really, you need time on one hand, but you need to implement it on the other immediately. So it's kind of a catch-22 there.
Yeah, so I echo what we've been hearing. Great presentation again. Still want to leave the opportunity for a couple more questions before we wrap it up. But while we're waiting on another question, I'll throw one at you again. I'm breaking into the field. Why do I care about quantum cryptography when it comes to interviewing, getting a job, or staying abreast?
Yeah. So I think in any IT and cyber industry, I come from a cybersecurity background. Part of your whole job is researching and staying up to date, right? There's a good position will allow you to research during the job and make sure that you're up to date. Make sure you're up to date on certifications. Make sure you're up to date on the information, because in this sense, quantum cryptography and quantum computing attacks is going to be a reality. There's really no way around it. So to your point, I think when that happens, it's almost like another AI boom. Everything's going to change, right? So now with generative AI, you can clone faces, you can do deep fakes, you can write scripts, you can do anything mostly with Gen AI, and it'll look decently passable, especially if it's erring on the text side. I think we're going to have another shift when quantum computers become viable, like AI, not exactly like it, but similar, where industries are having to immediately do a 180 and shift to either combat it, enforce it, adopt it, whatever the case may be. I think there's going to be that point, Y2Q. There's going to be that point where it's going to matter to everybody, right? And it's going to matter to everybody all at once. Let's see.
Did we pick up some static there, or was that just me?
No, I did as well. I don't know
Okay.
where that came from, but
I was trying to fix it. I heard it
oh,
pop into
gotcha.
my ear. So
Yeah,
sorry to
but
interrupt you.
there's gonna be a day where it matters to everyone, just like AI, right? You can't go a day without hearing AI. So for me, I would rather be on the forefront, knowing AI was coming, knowing OpenAI was developing ChatGPT, and then finally, using it, trying to learn it, and trying to implement it into your workflow. It helped. If you were in that position, it helped you get in front of the game instead of going to work one day or going to school and not knowing anything, and your professor accuses you of using AI for a paper, or your work accuses you of using AI for a presentation. There's going to be a day where quantum matters to everybody, and I think you need to be on the forefront. You need to do your research, especially if you're in the tech industry, cyber industry, IT, security. It's going to matter to everybody. So I would stay on the forefront.
Excellent points. So I just threw up Chris's LinkedIn. Please connect with him, stay in touch. I appreciated his time today. I'm going to turn it over to him for any final remarks, and if you want to share how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you to Fletus for letting me come on today. This was a great experience. This is kind of a first for both of us. Fletus has been a wonderful mentor, and yeah, if you want to connect with me, I would be happy to add you back on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat sometime about quantum cryptography or anything cyber and industry, IT, security, whatever you want to chat about. I'm all ears. I would love to connect. So yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you to Fletus. Thank you all for joining tonight. I know we have a couple people in some late night time zones, so I appreciate you staying up. Yeah, thank you guys for letting me come on here.
Once again, I appreciate it, Chris. I look forward to seeing what other presentations you have in store. As we just a little shout out for Chris. Even though he's graduated, he's been willing to sit through a webinar series. That's how I was first introduced to this topic. I decided I didn't want to keep it into the paywalls in which this webinar was being held, and you guys would value add from this. Every professional who sat through this presentation, myself included, has learned something from this. So I hope that you guys, as you sat here and are chewing on quantum computing and quantum cryptography, are coming away with the action item of now I know something, and this is what I can apply personally, professionally, when I'm looking for my next job. With that, appreciate it again, Chris. Thank you for your time, and look forward to catching up with the community in the future. If you liked what you saw today, please like and subscribe, connect with Chris. And until next time, stay safe and stay secure.